Hi, and welcome back to the HE Enable podcast. This is the show all about sharing our experiences of disability, neurodivergence, and long-term health conditions in the UK higher education system. I'm Kath, and this week I am joined by Steph. They are a third-year PhD student at the University of York, specialising in how we can use gamification to improve participants' experiences in online experiments. Steph also has a keen interest in accessibility and works as a games accessibility consultant, focusing primarily on cognitive accessibility in their free time. Hi, Steph. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Please, could you introduce yourself and share a little about your background in higher education?
Yeah, so my name's Steph. I studied German and Spanish with a year abroad for my undergraduate at the University of York, and then I stayed on at the University of York to do my master's in psycholinguistics. And now I'm doing a PhD with intelligent games and games intelligence. I know you've had a few people on from that one. Yeah. Like you said, focusing on gamification.
I want to ask you some questions later about how you went from psycholinguistics to gamification, because you're another York linguist who we kind of had loose contact, I think, when I was at York. But you're another person who I kind of miss and then has come back, and it's been wonderful. So if you're comfortable saying, how did your disabilities impact your experience of higher education?
So I have Chrons disease. I was diagnosed when I was 6, so my experience of education as a whole has been impacted by having Chrons disease. I am also late diagnosed autistic with long-term depression, anxiety, etc. Just that nice cloud of mental health conditions.
It's like the comorbidity bubble.
Yes. Once you get one disability, you have to catch them all. So, all of them impacted me differently, but also sometimes would affect one another. So my Crohn's, for example, I get flare-ups of this condition, which impact my energy levels and ability to attend in-person events if it's really bad. And stress from academia or honestly just existing, as many autistics struggle with. That can cause a flare-up for me on top of any dietary changes. Being autistic, and especially not knowing about it for a few years into higher education, impacted my ability to engage, particularly in seminar settings. I mentioned that I did German and Spanish. It was almost purely seminar-based work. Yeah, I struggle quite a bit with social cues, and I also struggle quite a bit in group settings. I'm pretty good one-to-one with people. I think that's where I've had the most practice with my mask. But in German and Spanish seminars, it's mostly group work. It's mostly interacting with one another organically, quote unquote, organically.
Structured, organic communication.
Yeah, I mean, if it was more structured, I think I would have had a better time with it. But unfortunately, that was not the case. It was very difficult going from school where, you put your hand up and that was the rule, I suppose I was used to. And being called upon like this, then just talking out loud in a seminar. And it took me a while to get used to that format.
Yeah. And I guess if you're already masking when you're speaking in English, I guess doing that in other languages as well must be a very interesting experience.
Oh, yes, definitely. I did German from A-level and decided... So initially I wanted to go into a more science background, but I did German as my, I guess, fun subject. And I decided to continue with it because something that I liked about speaking German was that I was focusing so much on the quality of what I was saying that I didn't really care too much about the social consequences of what I was saying. So it helped me remove the mask a bit. But at the same time, once I got to a certain amount of fluency, I was no longer thinking about how I was going to say something and the grammar and this sort of logic, and that's when I started to struggle socially.
Oh, that's really interesting. Actually, to be fair, that actually makes a lot of sense. My languages aren't very good, but you can kind of imagine that would happen, right? Next question. So, what was your experience accessing higher education from a disability standpoint?
So, when I first joined university, I didn't really have any idea of how to access things like student support plans or doing DSA applications, because I was never caught in the pool of people who would be contacted about it before university. When I did find out about it, my university told me I wouldn't need a student support plan for my Chrons, because this was the main thing I had identified at this point in my disability journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was told it wouldn't be necessary for my Crohn's diagnosis to be included on a student support plan, because the barriers it would cause me, which was primarily I can't come in because I'm having a flare. There was nothing they could really do about that, is what they said. This was back in 2014. The procedure for applying for accommodations was not as good, and there was a lot less sympathy as well, and awareness for certain conditions.
Was there lecture capture in 2014?
No.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. That's not good.
No, and also with how my course is structured anyway, because I was primarily seminars and not really any lectures, it was a really difficult thing to get sorted for myself. Towards the end of my undergraduate, when I did have a student support plan that also accounted for mental health conditions and my dissociation, they gave me the option to record seminars, but I had to get everybody's permission in the room in order to record them for myself and for note taking. So every time I would start with a new group of people, I would essentially have to disclose my disability to them. And it was a very janky solution. I think actually it probably would have been easier if I never said anything and just went in and recorded it, but
yeah.
And
also, if you're in like a seminar room and there's someone at the other side of the room, and maybe microphone technology wasn't what it was back then, you might not even be able to hear them.
Yeah, so the software they gave me was just something that would record on my phone, and then it would do automatic transcriptions. I would put my phone near the front of the room, yeah. And when I listened back to it, I could barely hear the lecturer or the module leader. As for other experiences, I had a lot of pushback on my mental health conditions when it came to my student support plan. And this was more of a departmental issue, actually, because in their words, you can't have anxiety and do a language degree. So
if I was playing like very extreme devil's advocate, I guess they're kind of being like, you have to be bold and you have to experiment and be able to get things wrong. But I think that's very different from social anxiety.
Yeah, so my anxiety isn't social anxiety anyway. It's more generalized, or I guess irrational.
Well, I don't think irrational is a good term.
When I say irrational, sorry, what I mean is I have sometimes I will have intrusive thoughts that I know aren't logical.
Yeah.
But I can't make them stop, and that is where the anxiety builds from them.
Oh, gotcha.
So, yeah. But my social anxiety, I had a lot of social anxiety in school, don't get me wrong. But when I came to university, it was a lot easier because I was a clean slate to everybody.
So, kind of going on from that, you've mentioned how the department might have said some things that were generally unhelpful. Did you encounter any other obstacles during your experience of higher education? Could be undergrad all the way to PhD. Did you overcome them? And if so, how?
So the main obstacle I've had from undergraduate all the way to PhD level is that I have to advocate for myself really heavily each time. And because I have multiple conditions, it's even more exhausting because I'll start with one, usually Crohn's disease. And there's a lot more sympathy for my Crohn's disease because it's something physical and often something a bit more visible for me. But when I got to my mental health and barriers from being autistic, once I received a diagnosis for that, it was a lot harder to get staff to listen to me, especially because when it comes to autism, there is this stereotype of what autism looks like, primarily in men. And I had to combat that whilst advocating for myself. And, it was bad enough before I had my diagnosis because I have been autistic all my life. That's how it works. I didn't just wake up one day and, I feel like I'm being autistic. So, but that was something really difficult for me and really exhausting, and would often make my conditions worse because to some level I was having to mask how I was dealing with social situations to get my point across. There seems to be this sweet spot for it where they're not questioning how disabled you are, but also you are eloquent enough for them to understand you. And finding that is really difficult. I had the same situation with PIP when I was applying for PIP. It's a barrel of fun.
And it kind of hits into that thing. Like, I know a lot of people, especially get late ADHD diagnoses. It's like, you can't have ADHD. You have like multiple degrees, or you speak so well and you're clearly very intelligent. And then it kind of goes against everything that you're fighting for.
Yeah, exactly.
It's generally unpleasant.
And like I already said, my department wasn't really equipped to make adjustments for me. And there wasn't really any appetite for improving on that. I do think a lot of it because it was before the pandemic, before there was more awareness about things like neurodiversity and mental health. I think a lot of it was down to a lack of awareness. Because when I go back to my old department now, it's quite surreal because I'm usually in a staff position now. But they're a lot better at handling it. Not perfect, mind you. There's a lot of room for improvement. I've seen some things that shouldn't have happened, but they've been handled more or less okay afterwards.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's something that should be done in hindsight. Things like access needs should be handled before the teaching happens, and there should be more thought and more proactive.
To be honest, it might just be my memory, but I originally applied for uni at York right before the pandemic, so 2019. I think I only had a physical condition that I was going to declare. And I'm pretty sure they gave me extra time in case I felt tired on the day of my exams from my condition. That might have been Oxford. I can't. No, because I had my ADHD diagnosis in Oxford. It must have been York. So it's so surreal to me that with your Crohn's, they were just like, nah, there's nothing we can do.
Luckily, the individual staff were pretty good when it came to my Crohn's disease. But part of that was because one of my module tutors had a mum with Crohn's. So they had a better understanding of how that could affect me day to day. But at the same time, actually, I will say I do like this member of staff. I think they're really funny, but sometimes they would say things and I wouldn't know what to say.
It wouldn't land in like a bad way.
So I had a conversation with them about my Crohn's, and they were heavily sympathizing and being really friendly and compassionate about it. And then I said, yeah, and it gets worse when my mental health flares up my condition. And then they said, mental health doesn't exist. And
and
suddenly I found myself in this conversation where, a moment ago I was getting all this sympathy for my physical condition, and now suddenly I'm being questioned.
Ooh, it's like, oh, I'm in a safe space, I don't need to do any self-advocacy. Oh wait, oh dear. Well, tell you what, why don't we'll pull away from the department for a second. Let's talk about your clubs and societies. Were there any clubs, societies, or initiatives that made a significant positive difference to your experience of higher education?
So I was in quite a few because I have quite a few special interests. But I found going to different societies and meeting people there was what eventually led me to pursuing my autism diagnosis. So they definitely helped me in my journey. And I found this wonderful community of like-minded individuals with similar barriers and struggles, which then made me question, actually, I struggle with all these things. Maybe I should do something about this. Maybe I should try and get assessed, which took many years. But if I had not been in these clubs and societies, I don't think I would have gotten there myself. I'm particularly fond of the Disabled Students Network. That was a group that I'm very thankful to have connected with whilst I've been at York, especially during my earlier years. It was wonderful just to vent about my poor experiences within higher education and also before.
I've heard, unfortunately, like the Disabled Students Network isn't really running anymore.
No, unfortunately not. Yeah, we have a bit of a legacy chat from where it was running in the past. But I find that a lot of the initiatives at York aren't as strong anymore.
It was Sophie a couple of weeks ago, and we were chatting, but because they are one of the directors of Disabled Students UK, they don't have the time or energy to revive it. And I think at this point, I think it's just waiting on people to pick it up. I know it's been in quite a bit of student politics in the past few years, but I don't know what we could really do nowadays to revive it. Luckily, there's more national schemes. So Disabled Students UK is great. I try and run this, and there'll always be special interest groups in university societies. But it would be really nice to see something like it running. Do you have any like other examples of clubs? Because you said you did quite a few of societies.
So being on a games PhD, a lot of them were games focused, like FragSoc, which is the main games one. I also did the esports spin-off of that. I played Overwatch. It's a nightmare. I played these games knowing that I get sensory overload and then I'm not very good at them, but it's still fun.
I mean, that's the point.
Yeah.
I don't think many, like, even if you're doing varsities, you are just doing it for the love of the game. As someone who has played Overwatch, that is incredibly fast-paced and with quite a lot of audio cues. So I salute you. That is, if I had voice comms on top of that, that would be a lot. But was it Overwatch 1 or Overwatch 2?
It was Overwatch 1 at the time. Overwatch 2 came out later. I still play it. I had a few months off recently, actually, because when I go through periods of burnout, I cannot do my normal hobbies. And then I went back to it and I asked myself, why? Why did I go back to it?
I ask myself the same question every year. I have probably like 2 weeks to a month every year where I find a new game and then disappear. So last year it was Celeste, this year it was Hollow Knight, next year it will probably be Silksong, and I just disappear. And you won't see me. But I never did FragSoc. I just kind of played my own games at home, even though I shared a lot of interest with them. Maybe I should have.
Yeah, I had that with a few of the societies. Like, I wanted to join Anime Soc, but actually I felt a bit uncomfortable when trying to approach them because I could not match their energy. And I don't know, the nerdier societies that I really wanted to get involved with had a lot of gatekeeping, and it was not worth the trouble. But at the same time, there were some lovely people I found from there. I just never went to their events.
I think it's kind of the scale of special interests where you want to be like, I have an interest maybe in this anime, or I think this is cool. And then it's like, I have 70 tattoos of this. I'm going to be here every waking hour of every day. And I watch 5,000 anime and I'm just like, oh, I can't match that. But, I'm really happy that makes you happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to actually chat about your PhD stuff right now. So you trained as like languages and linguistics. So you went, let me get this right, from a pure languages degree to your master's in psycholinguistics to what is effectively now a PhD in computer science because you're with Iggy.
Yeah.
Okay. How did that happen?
I ask myself this a lot.
I'm looking to change fields. I'm here for just absorb your knowledge.
Yeah, so my degree was pure languages and actually slightly more restricted because I did one language ab initio, so from scratch, which meant that I did less linguistic modules overall for my undergraduate. But then when I so my undergraduate experience was quite muddled because I did a repeat year because of some spiciness that happened with a specific tutor. And it impacted like the whole year. So they let me repeat the whole year rather than just doing a leave of absence and coming back at that same point.
Fair enough.
And when I did that repeat year, instead of so I think the first time I did my final year, I did something like Spanish cinema. And then I decided I didn't want to do that again because my problem was with a Spanish tutor and I didn't want to have a repeat of that.
Fair enough.
And I went and did the psycholinguistics module. And before I did it, a lot of people who were in my cohort before they moved on told me, don't do it, it's really hard. And I did it anyway, and I loved it. I actually felt quite bitter about the fact that I couldn't do something like this sooner because I had so little linguistics in my languages degree that I didn't get a chance to love it. And when I did it, it was fantastic. And I thought, actually, I'm going to defer my PGCE and I'm going to do a master's in this because I think there's something there that is making me really happy. And, when I come across something like this, I'm not just going to let it slide. I then went on to do my psycholinguistics master's and it went really well. Actually, the person I spoke to about it is now my current PhD supervisor, which is quite nice.
Oh, nice.
And I was able to do it part-time. So I preferred that because, I preferred it, but I also had no choice because I was really poor. And so I had 3 jobs during my master's.
I had I always try and look through people's LinkedIns and stuff before the episodes, just so I can get an idea. Did you do your master's in COVID?
I did. Half of my master's was in COVID.
How were you working 3 jobs and doing that through lockdowns, right?
Very badly.
Oh boy.
I had 3 jobs. I was a tutor. I was working with a company called Streetwise within the university. So every Sunday and Wednesday, basically the club nights, I would go out and with a group of people from Streetwise, and we would just make sure students got home safe.
Oh, yeah, I remember you guys.
So I was one of those. Hi. And then I was also working part-time at Weaver, which was it's sort of something that was born from things like Iggy. So it was games research, and it was my first time being around it. My partner was in Iggy already, which really helped. But I started doing some work for them as an RA, and it was really fun. I didn't see myself going there though until much later on. But yeah, my master's was half in COVID, which meant my dissertation had to happen during COVID as well.
And I'm guessing psycholinguistics would have been lab work.
Yeah, so I initially wanted to do something with eye tracking of things that were more physical, but I could not be in a room anymore with people because of the pandemic. So I had to change it quite quickly. And I ended up doing a different type of online task. And I still enjoyed it. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, but it was good. So normally when we do these online experiments, we have an exit survey where the participants would say a few words about what they've done. Usually it'd be things like, it would pick up things like bugs or questions they had about the content. But something I was seeing a lot with online experiments because everything was online at this point, was that participants were finding it quite tiring and confusing to do them. And I found this quite frustrating because I think from an ethical perspective, we should be trying to make their experiences better, because they're essentially doing a favor for us. Even if they do get the incentive of like a £5 Amazon voucher or whatever we tend to give them, it's actually a lot less with the amount of funding that comes into linguistics.
That's true. But the thing is, it can be a massive, like, practical compound as well, because if you have participants that are getting tired, some amount of randomization might help, but it's not necessarily, you're not going to get the most accurate results from tired participants unless the point of your experiment is to wear them out.
Yes, exactly. So I would regularly rant my partner about this, because I was trained in a certain way. I was trained in very, I guess, internally valid conditions, because psycholinguistics is very controlled. And he said to me, well, why don't you do something about it? And I said, oh, I wouldn't know what to do other than maybe like adding some game elements in and trying to lead them through the task in a way that makes sense to them and making them enjoy it. Well, maybe not enjoy it, but I was looking at things like Duolingo at the time, because that's always been like the gamification example people point to. And at the time, I wasn't as annoyed about it. And now I'm a third year of my PhD, and I wish I didn't have to hear about Duolingo anymore.
I'm on like a 1,300 day streak, and I'm going to be honest, I use it for chess.
I do too.
It's good. We should be Duolingo friends. We should do that. But so you said that you're doing gamification of online experiments. First of all, as someone who also had to do, I did my scholarship research in the pandemic, and that also got moved online when I was meant to be in a York Linguistics lab. Thank you. I hope it applies to Qualtrics. Second of all, so obviously you're looking at improving people's experiences of online experiments. You're a third year now, so I'm assuming you're writing up. So you've done all your experiments, right? Give or take.
I'm a third year on a 4-year program.
That is true, yes. So you've got some more experiments. That is true, yeah, because you had doctoral training. Very, very fair. From what you have looked at so far, do you think that gamification helps general accessibility in online experiments? Your work in the games industry as well with accessibility? So I'm wondering if you'd kind of seen any parallels.
So it's quite hard to say, really. I do think that there are some consequences of gamifying a task, a condition, that will remove some barriers for people. I think people with ADHD will find a task easier to do if they're getting a reward for it. For example, there's been some research on that. It's difficult to comment directly on this because, frankly, there is nothing that looks at gamification and accessibility together. There is also nothing that looks at accessibility of online experiments. So when there are experiments that focus on accessibility features, but that's not the same thing. It's something I would like to do after my PhD, actually, because I think it's better for research as well if we target more diverse, more representative populations when we can. Obviously, there are some things where it wouldn't make sense to look at certain populations because they're not impacted by that. But there isn't anything out there, and that's made me quite interested. As for from a games accessibility perspective, from a more commercialized game perspective, I mean, there are a lot of things that are universal, but especially when it comes to accessible language and accessible user interfaces. But yeah, my industry experience cannot be compared with my academic experience because I have not got that academic background there to comment.
Yep, that's fair. I hope that you get the postdoc stuff for that as well. You mentioned that you do some work as a games accessibility consultant, which you started during your postgrad. What do you actually do in that, first of all?
So I use a lot of my lived experiences as a disabled person to advise game devs on how to make their games more accessible. I got into it because I'm on a games PhD and we have a lot of industry contacts. And somebody approached me after hearing me talk about how frustrating it is to be disabled and said, have you considered doing games accessibility work as a freelancer? And I said, no, I haven't, because it never occurred to me I could use my experience in this way. And then I went on to focus on cognitive accessibility and making more accessible language. It was easy to do that from a lived experience because my Chrons does impact how I game as well because of brain fog and my terrible joints. But I would say that the barriers I have in gaming come from me being autistic and having sensory issues, particularly when it comes to my hearing, and too much audio information is a lot for me and I go into cognitive overload quite quickly. So I started from there, and then I've done a few industry talks on how to make games more cognitively accessible and how to make language more accessible. And I've also worked in-house with game studios to run co-design workshops, aim to get devs thinking about barriers from different cognitive conditions and maybe how sometimes they interact as well. But my experiences during higher education definitely motivated me to get involved in this because I'm so passionate now about self-advocacy and advocating for others that it made sense.
I also know that Iggy's, because I know a lot of you now, Iggy's get a knowledge exchange, which is effectively a work placement as part of their degree. Are you planning on doing the accessibility consultancy as your knowledge exchange?
I am certainly trying to do that. There's some bureaucracy about it, and we have to have the placements last a certain amount of time and people sign off on it. And with how my freelancing works, it doesn't really fit the same model, but I can use it in this way if I get enough of it. Because the rule we have for our knowledge exchange is that it has to be 8 weeks of full-time work, but I do a lot of like 2 to 3 day workshops and this sort of thing. So it needs to add up to 8 weeks overall.
Go hire Steph, guys. Go hire them. They'll be great. Yeah, I hope you get that as a knowledge exchange because it sounds like something. I guess 2 to 3 day workshops are great, but if you had something that was longer, it would give you that depth as well, which I don't know if you need that or not, but I assume a bit of depth on something would never hurt.
Yeah, absolutely.
This next question, I want you to answer however you please. Sometimes the answer is lovely and in depth. Sometimes the answer is just no. Have you experienced any instances of your disabilities proving helpful in a higher education setting?
Yes, but it depends on the day how I answer this, I think. So as I've gotten further into academia, I have been able to choose what I study or I work on. And because of that, I've been able to restrict everything to what I'm interested in. And my hyperfixation does wild because of it. And it means that I can get work done in a very efficient way now, which is something I wish I had during my undergraduate because it was definitely more disabling than it was enabling then. After my autism diagnosis, I also began unmasking more. And at first, that was more of an obstacle because people didn't understand what was going on with me socially. But nowadays, I receive a lot of praise about how I directly communicate with people and the feedback I will give them, which is wonderful. And by being disabled and having kind of this training and self-advocacy, I also make a pretty good student rep. I will say so myself.
Yes, I've heard good things.
I guess something else that I'm pretty good at because of my conditions is that I really need structure to do well. And it makes me very good at sharing meetings and organizing them and keeping them short, which people appreciate.
I think it's one of those things where if you don't have the lived experience for like keeping meetings short, you wouldn't know. But if you can keep it as concise as possible, preferably under like half an hour, 45 minutes, you'll keep a lot more people's attention.
Absolutely, yeah.
Keep it relevant. Oh, I'm always really glad I asked that question, no matter the outcome, because I struggle a lot with seeing the good sides of my own disabilities, and being able to hear people talk about it is just great. But you're absolutely right about the hyperfocus. For a long time, and one of the reasons I love video games is video game history was my hyperfocus for a very, very, very long time. So I love like being able to talk to you guys and then bringing up this like niche bit of history and then applying it there, and it's great. This next question I'd actually really like to ask you, because you do the student rep stuff and you've been, especially in the York system, you know it very well. We can apply this either to your experience or not. It could be very general. How do you think we can improve the experience of higher education as both individuals and a society?
On an individual level, I think having open conversations with disabled people rather than just assuming what they need is a very simple and effective step. It's something that's been relevant throughout my entire higher education journey, and also within my games accessibility consultancy role, where, just because two people have the same condition, it does not mean that they have the same access needs, especially because usually when you have one condition, you tend to have a couple of others going on because comorbidities. So that is something that's pretty effective as well when the institutions are failing you. If I did not have those tutors that would listen to me about my conditions during undergraduate, I think I probably would have dropped out and I wouldn't be here right now, because I would not have any of my accommodations, full stop. I think peer support networks are also really helpful for community, but also understanding each other and ourselves, because something that's quite difficult to do when you enter higher education is figure out what you need, because you've never had to deal with something like this yourself. And if you're like me and you have a couple of other things going on, like autism and some complex mental health conditions, it can be a lot to take on. You don't know what adjustments you can actually get and what are classed as reasonable as well.
Yeah, especially if you don't know you have those conditions.
Yeah, exactly. Something I quite like about teaching in the university now is that I can see quite early on when people are struggling like I did, which means that I can recommend them and signpost them to the disability services and get them the ball rolling for them if they need it, which is actually something quite helpful, I guess, on a society level. Hire disabled people.
Yeah.
Because, if you have people in the ranks who have been through this experience, it will be easier for everybody involved, because they will have the experience to know what would be the best course of action. And, we should really try to make accommodations less bureaucratic and recognize the emotional labor of disclosing disability for disabled people and the amount of energy that goes into self-advocacy. So if people can pick it up for you, that's fantastic. Yeah.
It always reminds me of the conversation I had with Kathy a few episodes ago, which was essentially like they spoke a lot about how we should have compulsory disability training for supervisors and how helpful that would be. So it's not just hiring disabled people, which people should do, but statistically that's not going to be the entire population. It's also about how we can make people who are, allistic, neurotypical, don't have any other disabilities or conditions, how we make them aware as well of what we're doing and how we can help people.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with my old department, I know that they don't receive a lot of training with disability and neurodiversity, but the minimum they have received, I can see myself how much it's made a difference in the past 10 years or so. Because before, they were, when students had this conversation about the barriers from mental health or from neurodiversity, they were just being met with confusion.
That's rough, buddy.
And denial. Yeah, that's rough, buddy.
But yeah, it's nice that it's not met with a sucks to be you, I guess, anymore. I'll take that as borderline good. What, borderline? I take it as very good progress. Very, very good progress. So obviously that's all really informative and useful, and I hope that if there's anyone listening from outreach departments, they can take something from that. We're going to close it up. So last question. If we came back to talking about your story, obviously it went through a lot of like time at York and you've learned a lot, let's say. What is one key takeaway that you would like listeners to remember from your story?
My experiences in higher education have not been very positive overall, especially in my undergraduate. And it showed me how exhausting it can be to constantly advocate for yourself. For years I felt unheard, and then suddenly a pandemic hit and the changes that I'd asked for were all made possible overnight, which was wonderful for me and wonderful for others, I imagine, but also really frustrating, as it should not take a global crisis for people to listen and be sympathetic. But it did show me that change was possible, and it also helped me find the community that I so desperately needed. So had that not happened, I don't think I would be here advocating for others as well as myself. The main thing I would like people to take away from this is that it is important to find community that will support you and share experience with you. And that could be in the form of friends, colleagues, people who have gone through similar things, staff. You are not limited to one group of people.
Go make friends.
Yeah, go make friends.
It's also good, like, you can have different communities as well. You can have, like, the bureaucratic ones. You can have the people who are behind you. You can also just have, like, the random societies that are helping you absolutely loads and loads. I think Toby mentioned a lot of that in his episode. And that's important too. If you can vary your communities, great. If you struggle with that for whatever reason, try and find a way, because I think it's very, very beneficial. Right, Steph, we're done. That was the last question. So, what we're going to do now, I'm going to say my spiel, and then we will be done. We will be free. The HE Enabled podcast is the show dedicated to sharing our experiences of disability, neurodivergence, and long-term health conditions in the UK higher education system. I am always looking for people to come on the show. Always, 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 especially in November. So if you want to come on in the next few weeks, please get in touch at henenabled@gmail.com. The email is in the link tree in the show description. We also have a Patreon now, so if you wanted to contribute for the low price of £4 a month, about a coffee, your support would go a long way into helping this show grow. All right, Steph, we're done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.